Well, I have no primary interest in megaliths. Um, I'm what's called an applied epistemologist, which means that I take any body of knowledge, usually academic, but it could be political or social, and I look at the knowledge and I work out why people believe it. Sometimes people believe it because it's true, but that's not the usual case. Now, of course, I'm drawn to Megalithomania because it's a classic area where people believe things on the whole not because they're true, but because it makes them feel good. But this is also true of archaeologists and prehistorians generally, because there just isn't enough fact, there isn't enough data for anybody to be sure of anything. So it just means that myths flourish on both sides of the divide. So I was drawn to it, well, historically I was drawn to it. I just had a theory one day about the stone circles, and I met John Michel at a party, and I explained the theory to him, and he said, "Oh, that's quite interesting." And a few years later, I was looking for a subject for my next book, and I remembered this, and I remembered that megaliths are quite popular. They're quite big. So I started writing it, and then Hattie got involved because originally the book, actually the book was a walking book. It was a series of walks, and you crossed the British countryside, and and the theory was explained in practical terms. You could actually see the ley lines, you could see the stone circles, you could see where people were trying to get to. But nobody was interested in that, so I then we wrote a theoretical book, which is how I got involved with this. But megaliths. I as I said in my talk, I'd never seen Glastonbury Tour, but I came to the conclusion that it was artificial. I don't myself do much primary research. I get everything off the internet and just lie in bed and work it all out. The question of why the ancients appear to spend so much effort and time and resources on megaliths is a puzzle. The critical last point is that it's got to be of sufficient usefulness to spend that time and effort, and it always seems to me just building a barrow to bury some soul, it's just not enough. So I developed a theory where more or less every megalithic building, structure, whatever, is for a central purpose to that society, which is navigation, trade, the commonplace but vital. The problem with long distance trade in all aeons, ever since the start of certainly agriculture, is that you can't have long distance trade unless you have some sort of long distance or organisation. You can't just set out and hope for the best, even if you know where you're going, because you won't get there. Somebody will knock you on the head and take what you've got. Why not? But in illiterate times, you can't have large states. You can't have a state that's bigger than about 50 miles across. So how do you marry these two things? Once you've got literacy, the problem's solved, because you just have large empires and they trade across it, no problem. But pre-literate, you have small states, but long distance trade. The solution that was come up with eventually was the megalithics. And basically the deal is, the megalithics say to the territorial states, look, we'll handle your long distance trade, you just sit back and benefit from it. All you've got to do is to let our guys through. That's the deal, and it seems to work. The system has to, because you're not Look, with the Roman Empire, you can just put up a little milestone, and you know it'll be there for as long as the Roman Empire lasts. In pre-literate times, the state is evanescent. It's small. It doesn't last long. You just have no idea what the political conditions are going to be like next year, in 10 years' time. So you have to build so that it's indestructible. Even if in 10 years' time some political, there's some revolution, some state gets overthrown, other guys come in, what can they do? If it's a megalith, it's a megalith. You can't move it. This is why the stone circles lasted so long. They're just difficult to move. The megaliths have no ego. The megaliths are not interested in show, in prestige. They just want to get the job done. So they'll build small if small will suffice. So we can assume that it's political states that are building enormous stuff because that's what they do. I mean, and I mean, I was very impressed by Gary's Etruscan material, but the problem is he's dealing with a time when it might be literate states. You can't quite tell whether it's pre-literate. But on the whole, very big stuff is probably political, and not my kind of megalithic. Moving stones over large distances is a quite an interesting proposition if you're a heavyweight trade, long distance trade organisation. So, for example, Karnak. You look at Karnak and you can see that Karnak is a site for quarrying, for storing all those rows of obelisks, and for sticking on boats, and then the boats trundle up and down the coast all the way up to Skara Brae, all the way down to Morocco, carrying these great stones. And the same on Dart. If you go to Dartmoor, I can't remember the name of the place. What's the name of the Dartmoor place?
Maryvale.
Was it? Maryvale. Maryvale is exactly the same. It's a nice stone quarry, rows of stones, and there, look, a pony and trap comes along, a pony and sledge, whatever it is. But ponies or bullocks, you could just carry these stuff away. It's not that difficult. But you've got to remember, these things are only done once. In our culture, we're used to sort of time frames of 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and we have to replace stuff. The megalithic's not like that. They said, okay, look, it's a fag taking an obelisk from Dartmoor to Dorset, but you only have to do it once. We've got to distinguish between two kinds of stone circles. There are the very big ones, which are clearly used by professional astronomers, surveyors, and they seem to be working at the top end. But I'm not so interested in those. I'm interested in the rural, small circles. There's thousands and thousands in Britain and Ireland. You find them in fields, you find them everywhere. And those small circles, they are not used for fine astronomy, but they are used for astronomy. And the reason is that when you're using the stone circle, you need to know, first of all, you need to know the local ley line, but you also need to know the local alignment with the rising sun for that morning, because that will give you a permanent record, insofar as there's an angle between, if you stand in the middle of a stone circle and you mark the direction of the ley line, you mark the direction of the rising sun, or any other astronomical alignment you want. You've got a permanent record, because it'll be the same tomorrow, and it'll be the same the day after. All right, the straightness of ley lines is A, very important, and B, rather misunderstood. There is nothing mystical or mathematical or anything about a ley line. A ley line is just a simple device for not exactly moving. They're not like roads, but they are simple devices for navigating across country. The reason they are straight is not because that's the quickest route between 2 points. It very rarely is in the English countryside. The reason they're straight is because straight is unambiguous. So as soon as you look behind at one point on the ley line, you look where you are, and that will tell you exactly where the next point on the ley line is, because it's a straight line and it's unambiguous. Now the truth is, it doesn't have to be that straight. This is a point that John Michel made. He got quite impatient with people who thought, that ley lines have got to be, within inches. They don't. They just have to be straight enough for the purpose. And as long as they're straight enough so that you can readily recognise the next point on the ley line, that's fine. But, having said that, there are certain ley lines, just like with the stone circles, there are certain ley lines that are used for surveying, and they do have to be laid out with supreme precision. And the microline is one such example. So just remember that ley lines don't have to be particularly straight unless they're particularly straight. The problem I have with John Michel and the microline is my general problem with, let's say, the Megalithomania community, which is that they on the whole decline to see these as rather prosaic everyday objects for a very ordinary purpose. Everybody, including John Michel, it has to be said, just seem to want to go to the next level up. They seem to want to go to a purpose that's just not necessary. So when I say, let's go back to Glastonbury Tour. I say, look, Glastonbury Tour is just set up there so that you can see it from the monk. What's the next one down?
Borough Monk.
Yes, that and that's artificial. It's made of marl, and they're made so that you can see them from particular vantage points. It's not. I mean, now it's true that when you see, and this is the difficulty, we're not dealing with although the Glastonbury Tour might just be a signpost, but of course it's been there for several thousand years, and it's become very, very important for a large number of people, so that over the centuries, over the millennia, other myths get encrusted on it. And remember, I mean, Glastonbury Tour is on the microline, and the microline is very important. So Glastonbury Tour is not an unimportant place, but it's not a sacred place. But it's made sacred later by people making it so. You build an abbey on it. One of the problems is about dating. On the whole, enthusiasts for the megalithomaniacs like stuff to be as old as possible. Now, what's interesting is archaeologists also like things to be as old as possible because it gives them kudos. But they have to defend their paradigm. Their paradigm is that there's the Bronze Age and it's 3000 BC, and there's the Romans, right, and there's this and there's that. Everything has to be put into that time frame. So I mean, I'm quite a fan of Velikovsky. Velikovsky comes along and says, look, you're 700 years out. Now, it's quite obvious if you look at Velikovsky's work. He's completely correct. He's crackers about other stuff, but he's completely correct about the gap. But archaeologists won't listen. Historians, they won't listen because they don't listen to stuff like that. So time is a factor, but I don't, on the whole, go along with this stuff about 7,000 years, 10,000 years. I like to keep, when I can, I like to keep within orthodox boundaries, simply because once you leave the orthodox boundaries, anything goes, and I don't like anything goes. My talk didn't cover much of the material that's in the megalithic empire, because although that dealt with the local, it dealt with the practicalities of getting around, and it dealt with the internal British situation. I felt the need to widen the scope, and just a few months ago, in fact, it was strangely enough during the London Olympics, which were the yachting was set in Portland and Weymouth, which I knew quite well from family circumstances. So I was watching that, and the commentator said at one point, well, the yachtsmen are not allowed compasses, and they're not allowed charts or maps or anything. And this sort of brought me up short, because I realised that this is the position that megalithic sailors are in. And I knew that Portland is intensely megalithic, and of course Weymouth and South Dorset, and the Channel Islands indeed. So it was at that point that I started putting together this new theory, which is concerned with how sailors navigated. Remember, you can't have a ley line in the open ocean. You can't build a megalith in the sea. So you have to use a different technique, and we discovered what that technique was. And what it was you designed causeway tidal islands with Venus pools. And, although it sounds crazy, you actually used cormorants to fly between the Venus pools, because Venus pools are very good for cormorants. The details I won't go into at this stage. And it turned out that the whole system was very elegant, very megalithic, and more than that, it turned out that a great many causeway tidal islands had to be artificial. So just like Glastonbury Tour is artificial, so Mont Saint-Michel is artificial, St Michael's Mount is artificial, Jetto in the Channel Islands is artificial. And once you get to that stage, once you're saying, look, the megalithics are really building on a big scale, then you really have to start changing our understanding of British history, British and European prehistory.